of tonight's discussion is talking about holistic wellness and the four pillars of wellness and how artists should be implementing these four pillars throughout their everyday practices. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it is something that each and every one of us should be making sure that we pay close attention to. Just because of the impacts of COVID-19, the unrest that occurred during the riots and social injustices of 2020, all of these things compounded really weighs heavy on us. And so tonight we're going to discuss those things. The four pillars of wellness are financial wellness, mental wellness, physical wellness, and spiritual wellness. Right now I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we'll start with Dr. Jamal.
Hello there. I'm Dr. Jamal Ross, and I am trained in internal medicine. I currently practice on the south side of Chicago at Oak Street Health. And in my practice, we have a focus on preventative medicine. So,
thank you, Doctor. Paul?
Good evening. I'm Paul Branton. I am a Chicago-based visual artist. I'm also a filmmaker and a poet. I've been exhibiting in and throughout Chicago for a couple of decades.
Thank you, Paul. JP?
Hey, my name is Phillippe Jean-Pierre, Chicago native, based out of Washington, D.C., and adjunct professor in fine art at American University.
Thank you, JP. Erica?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Erica King. I'm the president of Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, Microfinance Group, long name. We're a nonprofit CDFI that works right here in Chicago to provide resources to entrepreneurs that have been historically mistreated and that are now underserved, under-resourced, and overlooked. We provide small business loans up to $200,000 in some instances to small businesses. But for the sake of today's panel, I'm just going to call myself a financial artist, if that's okay.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Cindy?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cindy Leese, and I am a licensed clinical social worker based out of Pivot Collaborative in Hyde Park in Chicago. I was born and raised in Chicago, but I'm a child of Haitian immigrants. They would scold me if I did not mention that. And I'm also a visual textile fiber artist and mixed media visual artist in Chicago as well.
Thank you, Cindy. Candace?
Candace, you're muted.
She's trying to unmute.
Okay, I'm there. I'm sorry. I yelled for my child to come help me. My child is a video maven, and I'm just here, being her mom. That's what I am. I'm Candace Hunter. I'm a visual artist, water rights activist, and occasional ranter. And I'm happy to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And welcome to all of our guests. So we'll jump right in. So let's begin with the financial pillar of wellness. We're very aware of the economic impact of COVID-19 for everyone, but specifically in cultural and creative sectors. How will creatives recover from the pandemic? And I'll shoot that question over to Erica.
Sure. Well, I don't have a very good answer for that other than by saying, creatives can recover by doing what you've always done, and that is to innovate. And just some examples, from our organization and how we've had to innovate is, we had to learn how to work remote and serve our small business clients remotely. So I would imagine creatives would need to figure out a similar way to, capture their clients and their audience using technology and some of the other, modern day, not modern day, but some of the other things that they can do to help recover, during the pandemic. we've also had to, create and promote grants during the pandemic to help our business clients. We've had to learn how to creatively modify loans, to help struggling businesses survive through the pandemic. And so, we're constantly innovating, and providing solutions that align with our mission and our goals in order to help level the playing field for overlooked small businesses. And I would imagine, from a creative standpoint, you're going to have to constantly do a lot of those things too, innovate and look to see where the opportunities are to be able to capitalize on this new normal that we're in right now.
Indeed. Charles, would you like to follow up on that?
I think the pandemic was an opportunity for us to all get the gist. And GIST is GYST, get your stuff together. So when I was applying for grants, federal and local grants, they were asking for income statements and income balance statements, and they wanted to see records of my sales for the last 2 years prior to the pandemic happening. And if I didn't have that paperwork ready, I wouldn't have been able to get the funding that I had. So there's things like accounting that is essential to art practices. It's just as essential as like an art dealer or art consultant or appraiser as a part of your practice, or a graphic designer. You have to have accounting as part of your team. I'm sure, I forget the name of Erica, right?
Yeah, Erica.
Okay. I'm sure Erica was asking for that type of information for the support that she was giving out. That was one of the major things. And then documentation is important too. So one of the things that funders were asking for was like, what money have you made and what money are you missing out on? And then what kind of contracts did you have too? So if I didn't have contracts already set in place and say that I lost those contracts, I wouldn't have been able to have funding too. So oftentimes we do shows or events or talks like this. And I think it's just important to have contracts in place so you can show documentation of where you are, where you've been, and where you're going.
Hey, Charles, I'm glad you said that, because you're absolutely right. Our organization, we helped last year to provide about $14 million in grants to small businesses. Now, historically, we're a lender, but last year was a different type of year. And so we work with the city, the county, the state to do that. And you are absolutely correct. I mean, my team, we worked tirelessly to ensure that small businesses had access to this grant capital. And we saw applications that we had to turn down because of the things that you said. Finances weren't in order, not even just in order showing profit. We're not even talking about that. We're just talking about having a financial statement. We even tried to help as much as we could by creating a template to say, hey, fill this out. But many people just, thought that was an overwhelming task. So to your point, did you say shit together? Can I say that? Did you say that? Or get your stuff together? Sorry.
Stuff. The gist.
I'm so sorry, you're gonna kill me. Get your stuff together is so important. In addition to the financial statement, though, we had to deny grant applications.
I mean, so I think a lot of us have had downtime. So another thing outside of just applying for grants is having inventory of my work. So every piece that I've ever created, in theory, should be in an inventory list where I have who it was sold to, how much was it sold for, was it sold as a discount, was it sold or was it given away or gifted? And then if it was gifted, was it to a not-for-profit? Is that tax deductible? Things like that go a long way, not just for getting funding for other people, but understanding where you are as an artist. One other piece of advice that I got from my accountant is have all your expenses on one card so that I'll slow down. I think how artists, to answer the question more clearly, how are we going to make it through the pandemic, aside from getting the gist, is understanding that we're not only artists, but we're businesses. Every artist is a business. And then once you understand you're a business, then you can get the gist.
And that leads me into the next question. What does it mean for artists to present themselves or to operate as a small business? What are your thoughts, Paul?
Well, I had this conversation a while ago in regards to as social media grew and how you were representing yourself. Are we representing ourselves, our personal lives, or am I just strictly representing myself as a business, or are they combined? And I had to tell my family at one point, I look at myself as a living, walking brand. Everything I do, everything I put out there, it's a representation of what I market and what I sell and what I push, which is my art. So you need to start looking at yourself as an entity and treating it as such.
Thank you. I want to go back to Erica and just talk about the American Recovery Reinvestment Act. I know you mentioned that your organization gave grants, which is something that you typically don't do. What do you foresee the forecast of these grant opportunities for artists?
Yeah, so typically we've not gotten into issuing grants. We are a lender. That's what we were organized to do. And so some of the most recent grant opportunities that took place last year, honestly, I don't foresee those continuing at the same level that they were as our economy is opening back up. Things are starting to recover from this pandemic. I did want to just kind of add, to some other points that were made about getting ready and the things that you needed to have in place. In addition to your accounting and financials, we had to turn a lot of grant applications away because of not having proper business licenses. You might think of your art or your skill or trade as as someone mentioned, it is a business and you have to treat it as such. And that means if you're doing business in the city of Chicago or in the state, that you have to properly organize as such so you don't miss out on those opportunities. So your stuff is together. So if grants come out again, if there are other acts, funding acts or recovery acts that are introduced, you'll be ready and you'll be equipped to take advantage of those opportunities. And so, one thing I will say about those funds, what happened, through not just the American Recovery Act, the CARES Act, and all those others that were introduced last year, there were many ways that those funds were disseminated to small businesses. The SBA had allocation from Treasury to use funding to repay certain microloans payments for 6 months. There were grants that were issued that passed down to the city, state, county level. Whereas again, if you didn't have your things in order, unfortunately, we saw a lot of businesses miss out just because of that. And these grants were just, being given if you had certain things in place. And it was really hard to see, businesses not be able to take advantage of that. But to answer the question, we had a lot of organizations reach out to us last year wanting to assist small businesses, including, of course, artists as well, that were impacted by either COVID or had spaces that were damaged because of the civil unrest. And we use a lot of those funds, as I mentioned before, to work with the city and the state and the county to develop and deploy grants. We also use funds to get creative, within our organization. We created a commercial real estate mortgage product that helped businesses purchase their own business location, hoping to reduce occupancy costs and increase and create wealth. We're going to continue to look and seek out for those funding opportunities so that we can continue to be innovative and to use it to help, overlooked businesses.
Thank you. Let's segue into the mental health pillar. We know that it is taboo in our community to discuss or to embark upon, a mental health wellness journey. But I'd like to tap into that a bit, and specifically Dr. Jamal. just with everything that occurred last year, the, civil unrest, the pandemic, natural disasters, that weighs heavily on anyone. But as it relates to creatives and artists, what are your suggestions on how artists can begin a pathway to mental wellness?
No, I think that's a great question. I think the first step in the pathway is just realizing that things like therapy services, psychotherapy is beneficial, and that the taboo around it isn't necessarily substantiated. There's excellent evidence that therapy can be as effective as medications. And especially with what artists in particular have been going through during the coronavirus pandemic, they're in a unique position to be affected emotionally, more than the rest of the population. The financial stressors that artists have is honestly different from everyone else. Housing issues that artists may have is different from everyone else. And when you add on top of that social isolation from the COVID-19 pandemic, racial disparities, there's a lot of emotional weight on our artists. And that first step is realizing that there's an issue there and what we need to do about it. So that first step is almost just getting rid of that taboo. And once that's done, it becomes a path of seeking out a therapist, which is a whole nother path, which has actually become more difficult during the coronavirus pandemic as well.
Thank you. Cindy, would you like to follow up to that?
Yes, I would. I think it's also important to acknowledge that the taboos and the stigma are there for a reason. The mental health field and the institution has also been a system that has created oppression, that has created disparity in the past, that has harmed people of various oppressed populations. Like, there is a legitimate concern there. So, I think we need to validate that as we encourage people to seek services or try to figure out if services make sense at this time and what kind makes sense, because there is a variety of resources and places to go and providers to seek out for lots of different types of things. And I think also when it comes to therapy, there's also the stigma and fear that, like, well, people are going to think that I'm like so-called crazy or something. And, we have to pay attention to how we're using that word in general. Like, most people in their lifetimes are going to qualify for some diagnosis, that I could diagnose someone with in my practice. That, like, life happens, stressors happen, and sometimes we have a hard time coping and dealing with that. And that's perfectly normal. But it's also normal and should be more normalized to find resources and support when we need it, when we're in those more vulnerable positions in our lives. And also to find a provider that we trust and who we have faith in. Like, the most important factor in the effectiveness of therapy is not necessarily what kind of therapy is being used by that particular provider. It's the relationship with the therapist that is the most effective aspect of change. Like, if you don't trust this person, if you can't connect with this person, if that relationship isn't there, it's going to be really difficult for that person, any artist, to meet the goals that they have for the therapy sessions.
Great.
Yeah, sorry, I could probably go on for a long time, but I'll conserve time.
You mentioned the need to normalize, seeking therapy and journeying on this path to mental wellness. What do either of you or all of you, what do you think can support the normalization of going to therapy?
So I think particularly during the coronavirus pandemic, some of that normalization has already been happening. There has been a significant increase in the number of individuals assessing therapy services from psychiatrists or psychotherapists, to the point where if any one of us try to find a therapist, more or less someone from our artist community, they would have a difficult time finding a therapist for an appointment, quite honestly. And so I think some of that normalization is there. Now it even becomes more of an access issue. So while more individuals, including those in our artist community, needed therapy, we necessarily didn't produce more therapists within a year's time. So quite honestly, there's an access issue. I think there's more work that can be done, particularly with gender differences and how therapy is perceived in that way. But I think some of that normalization has come through the coronavirus pandemic. We still have a way to go, but I think it's already happening.
And do you find, both of you in your practice, that men are a little bit more hesitant to embark upon therapy?
Well, in my practice, absolutely. Just kind of raw numbers, about 90% of those who seek therapy, or around 80 to 90% of those in our practice seek therapy are women. And there is a taboo around that, even more so for men. The honest truth of it is that when we look at certain illnesses, and even if you don't have a mental illness, sometimes you go through something, you just need to talk to someone. And so there is a significant disparity. But I believe that we're making some headway, but that disparity is very real, at least on the anecdotal level in my practices.
I would definitely have to agree. Our practice is a trauma-informed practice and queer-led and allied. And so the number of clients that we have in general who are cisgendered heterosexual males is really low because of the demographics that we tend to serve and who seek us out. But in the field of social work in general, I don't know what the numbers are across all mental health providers, but it's 70% white women who are social workers in the United States, which means that the numbers of providers who match any of the demographics of the population served is pretty narrow, it's pretty thin. Even as I was trained in my master's program, like a lot of the literature that we're learning from, if it's about diversity, it's assuming a white clinician with a client of color, not a clinician of color with, any demographic at all. And so, because I supervise some male therapists in my practice and their caseload is full. They don't have room. The demand is high, but there aren't enough providers who are male in the field. Like I would love to see more, but the numbers are small across providers as well. And that's an issue.
Yeah. So let's dive into the third pillar, which is physical wellness. And I'd like to ask Candace, how has the pandemic impacted or influenced your creativity since our movement in the world has been restricted, specifically last year?
So earlier on, I think your question was, you were asking how did artists make it through this terrible time? You didn't use the word terrible, it was another word you used. And I was sitting here going, I had the best year of my life. Just the best. This little space that I'm in right here, I created a little space within my space to create videos. My daughter did not return to her campus. It made no sense for her to be there on a campus that was essentially closed. So she came home to be with us and she became my videographer. And the very first week of shelter in place, I started creating videos on Instagram and YouTube, teaching anyone who cared to join in how to do something creatively with their mind, their heart, their body from this little bitty space. And it was not intentioned for artists alone, but for anybody who needed a little creative outlet. I even did mark making as meditation. So Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I taught people how to do mark making, but use it specifically as a meditative process. And I started out as like 10 people would join in a class, then it was 30, then it was 80, then it was like 300 people joining in. And I was doing them long before any institution set up and did digital classes and started asking people for money. The only thing I asked was that you came into the room with an open heart and you wanted to learn something. And so people could follow along and do with me, or they could just watch me because I'm a joker. I tell stories, and sometimes people just liked hearing my voice. For those people I think who were alone, it gave them an outlet. It gave them some place to come to be with a friendly, safe person in a safe space. For those who wanted to create, I had artists and non-artists sending me their work later. That was just, I was floored by the quality of work that came in. And what it did for me, because it wasn't about any kind of money, even though I paid my daughter to take everything, I did pay her. It gave goodwill out into the world. And that goodwill came back to me in buckets and bushels. So all of a sudden I started having people around the country who were seeing my work for the first time, viewing what I did and buying. And so I had weeks where I just had boxes and boxes of art to ship out, and I wasn't going out in the world. So my partner, you know, I would box everything up and he would go to FedEx or the post office for me because I had underlying conditions and I was sheltered in place for real. So I didn't go anywhere and he did all of that for me. And it just kept increasing my circle. Some of those people who I'd never met before, I actually consider friends, even though we've never been in the same space at the same time. But I created friendships. I created new art, art that has, I'm very proud to say, has secured me exclusive representation with an incredible gallery. It's given me 2 solo shows. Yay! You know, it was a good year for me. I have no complaints, but I understand that I'm blessed. I live under a roof with 2 people who I love very much and who I like very much. So I was never alone, but I didn't want other people to feel alone. And so I gave them a way into my world where they could express themselves. And so that was the good part of my year and the pandemic.
I remember your series of videos. It was so soothing. So I'm sure that is why it multiplied, and hopefully you'll start that back up pretty soon.
No.
No? Okay. I had to ask. I do want to mention that.
Go ahead, Tiffany. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I don't know, baby. Go ahead.
I just want to mention, no problem. Artspace is a provider of affordable housing and spaces. How important is the physical space to create? Like, how important is that, JP?
Oh, right. Thanks for having me back. Physical space is really important. I have a studio space / gallery in Washington, D.C. I've been running it since 2015, online since 2006. It's a place of peace. It's a place where I can only focus on art and think about art. And it's also a place that gives me a certain level of prestige that when I ask what I'm asking for the artwork, people can see that I'm investing into my practice. So they should too. I wanted to jump back to the mental health question, but maybe I can tie it all together. I also created a garden during the pandemic. And I started raising chickens and they were laying eggs and just gave myself something to do. I grew a whole herb garden, corn, tried to do everything organic. And it wasn't necessarily that I needed to feed myself from the garden. I just needed something to bide my time. I do go to therapy. I'm a cisgender heterosexual male. So I didn't realize how much of a unicorn I am because my therapist is also a Black male too. And what's interesting about that is that I was going to therapy before the pandemic hit, but it was only once a month because he is so booked and he is in such demand. And I think if I hadn't already had that relationship before, I probably wouldn't have been able to book him afterwards. So sometimes I'm like, man, I need an extra session or something like that. But he's like, if you need it, if it's emergency, you can hit me up. But I think it's more important to say have 24 sessions over 2 years than it is to have 8 sessions in 2 months and then think that it's over and done with. I consider having a therapist equivalent to me having a spa membership where I go once a month to get a massage, or a passport where I just get away. And those are things I couldn't do during the pandemic. So I had to create space at home and spent a whole lot more time in my studio.
Cindy, I'm interested also in learning about how you view physical space as relevant to your art practice. I know you spoke about the therapeutic aspects, but as an artist yourself, how important is physical space to your work?
It is very important. Like, because of the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I could compartmentalize things. Like, the therapy office was on 53rd Street, the art studio space was in Park Manor, and I could be home. And like those, you know, like the church and state are separated. But during the pandemic, all of that is happening in my house now. And my house was never meant to be a workspace or a home office or my art studio. So I've had to be really flexible about how I use space, and creative with like, what part of my house am I going to do my therapy work this week? What part of my house am I going to do my artwork this week? Because the space isn't meant for that. It's not supposed to function that way. If it were, I probably would have chosen a different apartment layout instead of the one I have currently. But it's been really nice in a lot of ways to have my studio practice in my home. Because I mean, I'm someone who's very spiritual. I have an altar in my house that I didn't have in the studio spaces previously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like it's connected a lot more to my practice, because the materials for that are right there next to the materials for my art. And, you know, they've always been very intertwined anyway, but it can be very meditative to do my work at home, and, you know, working on things, coming up with projects, designs, you know, imagining something and hoping against hope that I can make it reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I want to ask Dr. Jamal, how does your physical health well-being play a role in your mental well-being?
Oh, I think that's an excellent question. And before I even go there, I would just like to say for JP, I think that the disparities that we see in men accessing therapy services can be taken down by exactly what JP did, you know, just taking part in those services and being open about it. Because, you know, even after listening to JP myself, you know, I honestly have become more open about it. And to be completely transparent, I've never had therapy. But after listening to JP, I think I might. I don't know if I'll be able to find a therapist. But that's the kind of things that happen once we have some that are able to be very open about it and share. It allows other men to let their guard down, and it's a whole nother you know, something to unpack with men's health and mental awareness rather. So, but in terms of the link between mental and physical health, what we do know is if someone has uncontrolled depression, anxiety, or any other issue at all, it's going to be very hard for them to be compliant with medications such as for their diabetes, blood pressure, and things of that nature. And so to a certain extent, when we look at the pillar of mental health, it takes somewhat of a precedent because without the mental health being stable, and if it's really uncontrolled, the physical health piece, if there's any other underlying medical conditions, can somewhat go by the wayside as well. And so the mental health piece is critical. It certainly is critical. And I think the relationship is such that without the physical health being really under control, it's going to be very hard to take care of physical sorts of things. And so I think it's mental health, then the physical piece, but they certainly work together. But that the mental health piece is certainly very significant.
And is it okay if I jump in?
Please, yes.
One other point. There's also, with the type of trauma work that I do, like a lot of the trauma is held in the body also. Like you can experience pains in the body, headaches, like stress actually does kill people. And so it can be very intertwined, you know, like if your mental health is not where it needs to be, is not stable enough, it can create a lot of physical problems for you as well. And it's easier to get sick. Sometimes people don't eat or they overeat. Like, you know, a lot of these daily habits that keep us physically healthy, it becomes so much harder to do them in a way that's responsible for whatever we need for our body too.
Paul, how have you been maintaining your physical and mental health during this time?
Physical health, number one, I try to stay on top of what I consume. That's been very important, especially when we're not moving around and as active as we once were. And then being in one collective space. Like Candace said, she was with her two loved ones. I'm a father of four with a wife, and there's my living space and my working space, and a lot of times these things overlap. And you want to make sure that everybody's comfortable and everybody's stress-free, and it helps in the creative process. And then going back to the mental health aspect of it, while I was sitting here listening to people talk, I understand that being an artist, we think differently. We gather information, we process it differently, and we put it back out, and we release it sometimes in our art. But do we release enough? Because we absorb things differently than other people absorb. So, man, that's making me feel like I should be speaking to somebody once a month or every couple of months, if I'm not releasing everything I need to release.
That's true.
It's weird. Like sometimes we rant and we get our friends to listen to our issues and our problems, but therapists that's their job, to listen. It's something that's really amazing. And I think it keeps me on my square. One other thing that, first of all, I want to interject and say, Paul, I love you, man. We keep crossing paths. You like one of the Chicago artists that I look up to, man. Thank you for keeping the culture strong. I want to hit physical, mental, and space, touch all of those three things. I think going out into nature has been important for me. Just getting outside, getting on a bike, and using that as a creative space and an outlet. So I think that hits physical. There was an article in the Washington Post that talked about during the pandemic, men were realizing who their real friends were, or the lack of depth in their friendships. So like a lot of guys got together to drink, a lot of guys got together to watch sports, a lot of guys got together to chase women, or cisgender heterosexual guys at least, right? And what they found was that they couldn't go out to drink, they couldn't watch sports, and they couldn't go out and chase women. So it was like, what are my friendships really based on? And it was important for me and my friend circle or group chat or whatever to motivate each other and still get together and have Zoom calls like this and just do check-ins. And we were doing that for like a 6-week period. I also have another group of friends that are it's funny. I hope this doesn't sound weird, but those are just my buddies. Then I have an art circle of friends as well, and most of us are educators or professors, all Black men of all sexuality backgrounds, and we had check-ins and we talked about how to advance our work and how to support each other and things of that sort too. So I think friendships are important, and then artistic friendships, not just for networking, but for support, because only artists know what artists are going through. And then the last thing, to keep it kind of short, I've been reading a lot like self-help books. My therapist recommended to me a few books like codependency and those types of things. But one of the books that stood out to me the most over the last year has been The Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz. And it's just understanding yourself as a person and how to master yourself. So I can email a list of books to Tiffany that I've read over the last 12 months that has really kept my head on straight.
The Four Agreements is another one of his books that is really great. I'm not on the panel, but I just wanted to chime in and say how beautiful it is when someone speaks their truth, how it gives others license and agency to step into theirs. And to watch that happen on this panel has been just a blessing for me. So both about opening your home, Candace, and just your art and community. And then to see, sorry, you said what, JP? Is that correct? Anyway, to hear you share about stepping into therapy and what an important piece that is for your life is beautiful. I have a son and he's went through a really difficult time during this pandemic. And so I think more examples of men speaking about that is encouraging.
If we really, really want to go deep, over the last year, I had the opportunity to get closer with my mother. A lot of people or individuals have like child wounds. I'm not a therapist, but I really took some time out to heal those child wounds. And I think when you take the time to do that, everything else is clearer. It's like wiping the mud off the window shields. Like you'll see that a lot of your relationships in your life have been kind of veiled by the relationships that you have with your parents or your siblings or people really young in your life.
Thank you. So let's go and dive into the last pillar of wellness, which is spiritual. And I want to go to Candace. Does spirituality play a part in enhancing your mental health? If so, how so?
So I'm a lapsed Catholic. I sometimes find somebody's house of worship to visit, but not often. I think my sense of spirituality is sense of community and sense of loving those within my community. Most of my community are not artists. They are art lovers because they love me, but they are not artists. I have a couple of people who are artists who are very dear to me, but most are not. I've always believed that you go to college as an artist to have friends who are going to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, and maybe a minister, so that you're well covered when you leave. Because all of us artists, we're all searching for the same thing. So we need this larger group of people. And it's funny, all of my life before computers, before digital letters started to be, I always used to sign my letters, sunshine and laughter. And now it's my digital signature too. And the reason why I've always said sunshine and laughter is because we know we need vitamin D. We absolutely have to have vitamin D. And we have to have the endorphins that come from laughter. If we're not getting a good bellyache every single day, and I suggest every hour to laugh, then you're not healing yourself from within. And you have to heal yourself. It was not funny. Today, while I was in the studio, I turned on TEDx Talks. And Dr. Jamal Ross, I need to speak to you about that. So I'm listening all day long to all these medical practitioners who are talking about healing oneself, because we live in the most drug-possessed nation in the world. We spend all of millions and trillions of dollars on medicines, and we haven't figured out how to heal ourselves. So all of these doctors were talking about the blue zones. And for those of you who don't know, the blue zones are those areas within the world where people go past being octogenarians. They usually live to 100 or so of good, productive, healthy lives. They don't have cardiac arrest. They don't have high blood pressure. They don't have diabetes. Now, these are very secluded little areas where it's usually all like clans of people, families of people, and they're very active and they're eating very fresh, and their life is very different than any African American I know. I'm looking at all of them. All of these docs were saying the same thing. And I was looking for one to be African American. I was looking for one to address what we have suffered since first footfall on this continent. We have been in fight or flight mode since day one after the Middle Passage. And so all of that has built up, and I don't care if you live in a very lovely suburb or if you live in the center of the city, you are still in that same place as everyone else who's African American. And we are still in fight or flight all the time. And so all of those things are up. They're doing this, which is why we suffer from diabetes, we suffer from heart disease, we suffer from cancers more, we suffer from all of these things. And so what are those things that we can do ourselves to start the healing process? So one of the things I do, I tell you, a belly laugh as often as you can, as much as you can, share and laugh with friends. My small community, I found out one of my friends almost passed out the other day, and I'm just like, why? What was going on? What was happening? And she finally admitted that she had gone to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. She's older than I am, and had not eaten. So I've now taken it upon myself to call her every single morning. I don't care if it's too early. And I say, what are you having for breakfast? This afternoon, I said, so did you eat? And she says, well, I'm going to Sip and Savor now, and I'm gonna get a muffin and some tea. I said, yeah. How about some protein? So why don't you do some hard-boiled eggs, if nothing else, and grab one when you go. So you give people easy solutions to help them along their way. And you have to figure out who are those people who you can help and who are those people who can help you, so that we're not constantly on that little thing that the gerbils and the hamsters and the mice climb, that we're constantly doing like this and not getting anywhere. We've got to help one another. We have to figure out who our personal community is. It can just be 2 people. It can be 1 person, but you got to help somebody and they have to help you, because it's got to be reciprocal. But I'm telling you, you got to laugh and get some vitamin D. That's the answer. But Dr. Jamal Ross, you need to be on one of these TED Talks and talk to our community about how we start to heal ourselves. And I'm not talking about therapy. I've seen 3 therapists in my life. Something very horrific happened to me when I was about 40. We don't need to talk about what it was, but it was the worst you can imagine. I knew I needed to see someone. At the time, I was dating a gentleman who was the head of the Chicago Black Psychologists Association. He did not want me to go to anybody because they all knew him. They knew I was his fiance. He didn't want them to know what was my business, which was his business, which I thought was the craziest thing I'd ever heard in my life. I said, oh, so I don't really matter. It's just you gotcha. So that ended that relationship. But so I went and I found one woman, and I did 1.5 sessions with her. The second session, she was just like, so Candace, how are you feeling now? And I said, I want you to talk up like a normal human being. I want us to be human beings together. And she couldn't be that with me. So I left, found a second woman. I'm laughing, I'm joking. We're like, oh, we could be girlfriends. That's not what I needed. I have good girlfriends. I didn't need her. And so sometimes the search for finding someone can be more devastating than the problem. Finally, when I was at wit's end, when I literally was contemplating suicide, I called the same gentleman and I said, I don't care about your feelings. I need you to find somebody who I can talk to now. He got someone for me. I went to her office. It was supposed to be an hour session. I think we talked for 6 hours. She canceled everybody else. She let me talk for 6 hours. At that point, I started doing work on my own. She gave me a doorway to find how I could find some work on my own, in which I did. And I'm to this day, I'm very thankful to her, but I don't know how often I'm going to find that kind of person. And it's difficult to navigate that. When my daughter needed therapy, oh my God, I went through so many people to find somebody that was reasonable for her. And finally, after 2 years, she said, can I stop this? Because I don't, and I said, absolutely, you can stop this. So because the numbers are small, that look like us, sound like us, and have experienced some of the things that we've gone through, it's very difficult to find that person. So if you can't find a therapist, then you have to find other avenues to release things so that you can keep existing and smiling and be a part of a much larger community. And so I always ask people to reach out beyond yourself. So for me, it's meditation. It's not a formal meditation, but it's meditation. When I feel like I'm in a fear place, I start saying the Lord's Prayer over and over and over and over and over again until I can catch my breath again. Sometimes if I'm feeling tight, I just intentionally breathe. I've taught my daughter every time she feels something strange, stop and breathe. Count to 10, 10 out, 10 in. 10 out, 10 in, and just breathe and try and smile. And so we've got to find ways that work for us when traditional things don't work. And I talked too long, I'm sorry.
Beautiful, thank you. Charles?
There was a lot there. I just kept thinking indigeneity. So I am, one second. So I'm Haitian by culture or descent, raised on the south side of Chicago. But I understand that I have African ancestry. I understand that I have indigenous ancestry. And then looking deep into it, I realized that African and indigenous are the same thing and one and the same, because the definition of indigenous is just understanding that you have a history that's prior to colonization. And so we're all modern day colonized by either the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, the Portuguese, even the Italians to a certain extent, the Germans. And so I've been working spiritually to decolonize my mind, going to back home to Haiti, going to the villages where my grandparents are from, and I'm a sociologist in addition to being an artist. I use sociology in my practice, but I don't practice sociology per se. But saying that, my logo for my practice is a voodoo symbol, and it's a Papa Legba, and Papa Legba is a gatekeeper of sorts, but he's also a medium. So he's the connection between the spiritual world and the physical world. And I try to be a medium and a connector between different spaces. I'm also a non-practicing Catholic, grew up Black Catholic. And I remember interesting, and I'll try to make this short. I asked my mom, like, why are we Catholic? And I was like 14 years old. And she said, I don't know, because my dad was Catholic. And that was the end of it for me. I started sitting with the Muslims at the lunch table. My dad used to do videography in Chicago at Mas Miriam. So I had the opportunity to see Farrakhan a whole lot growing up and listen to those things, even though I wasn't Muslim. So right now I'm practicing. I have a breadth of knowledge of Catholicism and Christianity. I have a breadth of knowledge on Islam and somewhat getting a grasp on my indigenous spiritual practices. And I think I just try to be a medium and see the connections between all of those. That's has been my practice right now. And I try to transfer that into my art practice. And so like this figure right here is one of my pieces. It's 36 by 48. And every little piece is a universe in itself. So all of you on the panel are stars. I'm honored to be on this panel with you. But when you think about the word star, like what is a star? We think of celebrities and stars, but also stars in the sky. I think we're from the stars. We are light, and spirituality or religion for me, or even art, is just sharing that light with everybody, to keep it short.
Thank you. I also want to ask Cindy, how does your spirituality inform your art practice?
It informs my practice a great deal. A lot of my work has been centered on Haitian Vodou, its history, and I was also raised Catholic, but I walked away from monotheism a long time ago. At this point in my life, I am actually going through initiation for traditional African spirituality. And it's been a really enlightening process. I think for me, spirituality is not so much about faith, but about finding the truth of our history, finding out what is actually natural to us. And so much of what we are, given is not natural to us. Like, we live in a country that is designed to sever us from nature, sever us from what's natural to us, sever us from who we are in a lot of ways. And throughout the time of the pandemic, I've had a lot of opportunity and time to do a lot of research, looking into things and figuring out, how do I want to formally undergo this process? And it's been a wonderful blessing to be able to do so. Whatever guided me in that direction, my ancestors, like, thank you very much, because I really appreciate that. But it certainly shows up in my work. I feel like a lot of spiritual practices, traditional practices are highly stigmatized, and also seen as like evil in a lot of ways. There's a lot of derogatory like language and research and history around this. That just, I find, just keeps not being true for a lot of reasons. So I use a lot of the symbolism from Haitian Vodou in my art, because I want to kind of destigmatize this. I want to normalize this. I want people to be able to recognize these symbols as much as they recognize the target symbol. Like, why do I know that more than something from my own people? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm in this process of, learning more about what's actually natural to me and who I am and to my ancestors.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I wanted to just ask the other panelists if how rituals played a part for them as well in their work, in their art.
Ask the question again.
How has ritual played a part? In what ways? In your spirituality or your art? Stumper. Okay, we can move on.
I'd like to talk about this notion or the idea of a triple pandemic that's happening. We have the COVID-19 health crisis. As a result of that, there's this, economic insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and also the other pandemic of heightened social and civic unrest. Paul, what are your thoughts on this triple pandemic, and how have you personally coped with it?
Well, I think Candace put it, growing up Black in America, how we've already been
You're muted, Paul.
My goodness, I'm so sorry. So I was speaking about what Candace spoke of earlier, which was almost almost like a Baldwin quote when we said, like, growing up Black in America is you're always under this stress.
You're muted again.
I don't know why it keeps going to mute. I unmuted. Can we hear now?
Yes.
Okay. the triple pandemic. And how does that affect me personally? How does that affect my art? Growing up Black in America, there's always been a heightened sense of stress all the time. Not to say that we're not happy and we don't have great lives, because we can have great lives, but there's just a different sense of living in America. And when you add on these other factors to it, me personally, I just find a way to adapt. I find a way to reposition myself. If I'm not going out and making money, I learn how to make money not going out. If my family we're used to going out and eating here, we don't go out and eat here. We eat here. We adapt. We change. We evolve. So this idea of triple pandemic, this idea of the world is burning, the world's been burning for a long time, long before this. So me personally, I don't look at it as like this barricade. I just look at it as an obstacle that you just have to step over.
Thanks. Erica, what are your thoughts on how the pandemic and the civic unrest has contributed to economic insecurity?
Sure. Yeah, like my other panelists have said, we being Black in America, we know that we have been dealing with a lot of these issues since the very beginning. I can only speak from my own perspective as it relates to the work that I do, and how our organization has always existed to be able to reverse the impacts of institutional racism that has caused economic insecurities and even food insecurities, because many of our neighborhoods are food deserts and we don't have access to healthy food. And we don't have the ability to walk up and down the street to go and stop in at a business and eat and feel safe and feel welcomed. And so, in what I do, in my work as a nonprofit lender, we're also a CDFI, which is a community development financial institution. Our work has always been to ensure that, we're supporting healthy neighborhoods by being able to provide access to capital to entrepreneurs to go and establish businesses that are meaningful, that are morally responsible, that are adding value and enhancing the community by, allowing it to have all the other amenities that, will make a community healthy. And so, for my role, we've always had to, figure out where the gaps are in the market and how can we, make it an equitable, path for businesses to be able to set up shop, to own assets in their community, to set up responsible businesses, to get access to capital in order to do those things. So that's always been something that, we've strived to do. And so this triple pandemic that we're in right now, I've been in lending and banking for over 20 years. And, as we're talking, you guys are right. We've always been in it, but I don't know that I've always had to deal with all of the things at once. And that's probably because, I've been in banking, I've been in conventional banks and traditional banks. I've been here at the CDFI for 7 years now, and we're, addressing all aspects of that. And so, it's a lot to deal with, but we're going to continue to strive to do some of those things to make sure that there's equity in financing, there's equity in lending, and that we're constantly creating opportunities for entrepreneurs to thrive.
And Dr. Jamal, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the disparities, or if you see that there is equity in healthcare as it relates to, African Americans.
Oh no, absolutely. There are some disparities in healthcare. Our clinic does operate in one of the health deserts in Chicago. And, even before this disparities, and I think to Candace's point, there's certain disease processes that affect, minority communities, particularly African Americans, a little bit, not a little bit, quite a bit more than others, particularly that being colon cancer. Being a hot button issue, particularly in African American men being diagnosed with colon cancer at an earlier age. And even the National Society guidelines recommending colon cancer screening at an earlier age for African American men, with men in general having up to a 25% more likelihood of having colon cancer than women. And then being African American, compounding that by another 20%. And so on one hand, we have disease processes that affect African American communities, that particularly colon cancer affecting African American men more, but that access to the colonoscopy that could be life-changing may be somewhat sparse if we don't have clinics, primary care doctors, where we can seek care, quite honestly. And then on top of that, as in mental health, there is a taboo around getting a colonoscopy, around getting age-appropriate cancer screening, whether that's for your prostate, whether that's for colon cancer. And when we look at the 3 leading causes of death in America, it's heart disease, and then cancer-related death. For men, that's going to be colon cancer, prostate cancer, and lung cancer, of course. And for women, that's going to be breast cancer and colon cancer as well. And so it becomes important, how do we make sure these screening recommendations can be done in our communities that are health deserts? And to your point regarding the triple pandemic, which even complicates it even more, our clinic, when there was civic unrest, was broken into. And it hurt. Our octogenarians, our elderly populations could not get their medications the next day. And not just our clinic, but the pharmacies down the street. And so the civil unrest fed into the health crisis even more. Because not only are we in a food desert and a health desert, now the only clinic that was there is out of commission for a week. The only pharmacy that was there is out of commission. The only grocery store is out of commission. And quite honestly, during that period of time, it was very rough. And not only that, the jobs that were in those clinics, the pharmacies, there was an economic insecurity that was compounded as well. And I know there's a lot of moving pieces with health disparities, access, and civic unrest, and food insecurity and economic insecurity as well. But it seems to all feed into each other and be more impactful in our communities of color. And for me, I think one of the bright spots, honestly, is that the rebuilding that happened after that. For our clinic, we were rebuilding, the grocery stores rebuilding. And I think I believe it was Paul or JP that mentioned it. Even during this time, your relationships and partnerships in our communities by those who choose to rebuild. And so I think that when we're looking at access and disparities, we have to look towards partnerships as well, and strong partnerships that are willing to rebuild and that have an interest in decreasing, a heartfelt interest, a genuine one, in rebuilding those partnerships or clinics and helping decrease those disparities. And I think as JP mentioned, you realize during the pandemic who your friends are and why they're your friends. During the pandemic, I think we know who our partnerships are. And if they really had that heartfelt desire to decrease these disparities. So.
May I?
Go ahead, JP. Yes.
There was a lot of questions. Spiritual, what ritual? I'm sorry that happened to you, brother Jamal. Let's start there. That's heavy. That's heavy, man. I think people from Chicago and oftentimes in inner cities, like smaller places like Chicago, we live in bubbles. And it's a lot of stuff that's normal that happens in Chicago that's not normal in other places. I think the whole country was looking at Chicago at one point over the summer and over the last year. And being able to leave, I've been out of Chicago for the last 16 years. And hearing things like there's shootings at River Oaks Mall, like what? When did that? That's like crazy, but it's like normal now. But it would have been crazy if you heard that like 30 years ago or something like that. But my point is, Chicago, a lot of people don't know this, but Chicago is the biggest, blackest city in the Western Hemisphere, not in like the United States or not in the Midwest. I'm talking about from Cartagena, Colombia to Haiti.
You froze.
You froze, Charles. Sorry,
Am I muted?
you froze there for a moment.
Yikes, 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 yikes. But oftentimes people ask, I was in Paris once and somebody was like, where you from? And I was like, I'm from Chicago. And the first thing he said was bang, bang. And I was like, oh man, you trying to say we hood or something? And he was like, what you mean? It's hoods everywhere. It's hoods in Paris, it's hoods in China, it's hoods in Africa. Y'all violent. And being from Chicago, I always associated poverty and economic disparity with violence. And this dude from Paris was like, nah, that's two different things. The Chinese people ain't just killing each other because they're poor or whatever, right? There's like 2 billion poor people that live in China, right? My point in getting at this is like tying this back into the pandemic, tying this back into economics, tying this back into spirituality. I was in Haiti twice over the last year, and they're not masking up. They're not wearing the quote unquote pandemic hasn't hit them, but they had already been hit by economic pandemic, and they also been hit by violence. There's a lot of kidnapping and things of that sort going on. And I think the country was so weak that they were like, or so strong, depending on how you look at it, we can't deal with this right now. We've got other stuff going on, right? And to this day, Haiti has one of the lowest death rates due to quote unquote COVID out of the whole world. I feel like there's a lot of similarities being from Chicago and being able to travel to Paris, being able to travel to South Africa. I was in Cartagena last month. Colombia, which is a black town, one of the first free black cities in the Western Hemisphere. They freed themselves, they left, right? And I met with some Palenque people who are indigenous women, indigenous black people that have their own spirituality. They speak their own version of Spanish. And they also have the lowest rates of COVID in the whole country of Colombia. And I was asking, like, so what are y'all doing different? And they were like, well, one, we're kind of isolated. And two, we're using herbs. They're drinking teas. They're getting a lot of sun. They're swimming, staying active. Trying to put all this together, trying to tie health together with spirituality, with Blackness, with Chicago. I think it's important for us just to see the bigger picture. Because when you isolate it and you just in Chicago, there's things that seem normal to you that are not normal in other places in the world. And I think as artists, we need to use our creativity to open up the eyes of a lot more people and share those stories and connect those dots.
Thank you. Let's switch gears a bit. I'd like to know how social media has influenced or impacted your creativity. Paul.
Social media has been a fantastic tool, especially professionally. And as Candace mentioned, getting to know other artists that I wouldn't normally know because we're not in the same space is extremely helpful. Love out to you too, JP. I meant to say that to you earlier. Um, also new collectors. And a lot of times you connect with people and there are friendships that are built over years, people that you've never physically been in the same space before. It's a very powerful tool. And I was just saying that social media doesn't have to be a space of gossip and a space of debating over sports. Use it for what it can be used for. Especially during a time where I couldn't physically get out and show my art. I couldn't physically do shows. It was a tool for me to remain, number one, relative. And then I also put out social media. I also use social media as a form of practice of gauging how audiences view what I'm doing. And it helps out in which direction I'm flowing, depending on sometimes what responses I'm getting from certain images.
Any one of you can chime in on this question. This is more so about access to technology. Many artists who are artists in the traditional sense use paintbrushes, canvases, paper, pencils. What about access to technology as it relates to creating art digitally, or even using the technology to promote your art, sell your art, websites, those things? Candace, you're muted.
You
There
guys,
you
yeah, I didn't do that.
go.
Instagram was indeed my friend during this pandemic. Instagram and YouTube to house some of the videos that I created. But when Shelter in Place first started, my partner Arthur Wright and I, we were using the bandwidth off of our phones because I had never had internet connectivity in this 120-year-old coach house that I live in. And it was eating through our rates, to do any of this. And then with our daughter home, and all of her classes are virtual, we were like, oh my God, we've got to do something different. And so I started asking people, what's the best? What's the cheapest? What are the numbers that we need to look for? Because I didn't have that language of, the bandwidth, the G's, the K's. I still don't know what it is. And everyone and their mom were telling us where to go, what to do. And so Xfinity was having a COVID special for those families who had a student in college and had an income lower than whatever the number was. And so we immediately did that and immediately were put on a waiting list. And every time we called, it was just like, we're going to get to you. We're going to get to you. In the meantime, we're all using our phones for every piece of connectivity. So it took forever to get Xfinity. And then when we did, the world kind of just really freely opened up for us here. And I didn't even know how important that was to be connected like that. I just, the phone had been good for me otherwise. And so it really opened up the world for the three of us under this roof. And I don't know how we could ever go back to the other way we were living. But I was I was an early Facebooker. And Facebook is full of comments and political moments and stupid things from, how somebody's looking and laughing at some woman because she doesn't look like who, it's just crazy. And I was doing my art on there and not to great amounts of success because there's too much chatter on Facebook. And so someone finally said to me, well, you need to be on Instagram. And I said, so explain to me what it's going to be. What does this look like? So I keep Instagram solely for my art practice. I don't comment on what's going on in politics. The art might, but I don't. I don't type in those things. I don't talk about my health. I don't do any of those things on Instagram. Instagram is solely for putting my art in the world and for people to see it, appreciate it, and connect back to me. And so it has been a boon for me. And when I tell other people about Instagram, you know, I talk to them about how you do your hashtags, how you really want to reach out to a different kind of population, and how that's available to you on Instagram that it's not available anywhere else. And so it has become a great business tool for me. And so I don't think I could go back to any other way of doing this.
Charles, thank you, Candace.
I love you, Candace. I love. I hope I can be as hip as you in the coming years. Social media is scary for me. From 2006 to 2015, I didn't have Wi-Fi at home, and I thought it was normal. People would come over to the house like, "What's the Wi-Fi password?" And I'd be like, "Nah, I don't have it." And it wasn't that I couldn't afford it. It wasn't a thing for me. And over the last 6 years, obviously, if I've had it, but I think I've been able to not get distracted. I think social media is a big distraction. As much as it is a way to connect to people, like Paul said and Candace said, for business, I think it can affect your self-esteem, because you see other artists making it. You see other maybe people even quote unquote maybe excelling past where you are, and you might get disappointed or intimidated. And I think I didn't have that intimidation, and I wasn't comparing myself to other people because I didn't have access for it for so long. So for early part of my career, say if we're going from 2005 to 2020, my 15-year art career, for 10 of those years, I didn't have internet. I think the internet is scary at this point because you have a lot of people that are glued in, plugged in. That's all they see. I'm here in Dallas right now with my nephews and nieces, and they just can't get off of it. Like they don't even realize how addicted they are. And I feel sometimes I find myself being the same way. So I try to push it towards the business side as much as possible, like Candace is saying, and use it as a tool as opposed to letting the tool use you. And I mentioned this earlier in the comments. I feel like social media has become the religion of Gen Z. Like they wake up in the morning and we pray in the morning when we wake up. Gen Z is on their phone paying tithes to to their followers, and they all have their own ministries. Like your social media has almost become like your church, and your followers are your congregation, and you're just presenting I guess proverbs or sermons every day with these Facebook lives and all of that stuff like that. So I think balance is important, and I think it's also scary, and I'm really scared to see where it's going to take us 5 years from now or 10 years from now, because I didn't even realize this. My 14-year-old niece, there's a word for toddlers that grow up with tablets. And she was saying, as a 14-year-old who's constantly on her phone, at least she's not like one of those a tablet toddler that from birth, the minute they could see a ABC, they were stuck to a screen. I think art and creating physical aspects that we can see and we can touch that live in the actual world, I think that makes artists like us that much more viable and that much more essential to society.
Thank you, Charles. I want to ask Erica, how has social media connected Chicago neighborhood initiatives to the community?
That's a good question. We we actually just increased our social media presence. That was, in part to, our ability to hire a communications director. But we recognize that, over the years, we've done some really great things. And, it's good that we're doing really great things, but, we wanted to do more. And the only way that we can increase that was to let folks know, what it was that we're doing. And so we actually had a strategic plan. And part of that strategic plan was to be more visible in a lot of different ways. We're doing that in a lot of different ways. One of which is a rebrand, and that's kind of a sneak preview that's to come later. But another one of those ways was to increase our social media presence. I get and I hear and I can relate to technology taking over. I have teenagers and that's all they do. I want to take their tablets and their phones sometimes and I want to throw it, but then I have to realize or remember that I bought that, so I'm just throwing away my money if I were to do that. But for us in our organization, it's allowed us to pivot where we can't meet with folks right now in person. We're able to use technology. We're able to get out there on social media and let folks know of the programs that we have to offer. We're doing workshops online, just like this. We're doing technical assistance workshops. We have a partnership with Matt Forte, and we did a webinar together where we provided TA and wellness for small businesses. And so it's helped us to be able to pivot, especially during the pandemic. Like I said, when we can't do things in person, everything is virtual. And social media, we're using it again to, share information about new programs, connecting small businesses to one another. That's been really helpful. We're building that ecosystem where other small businesses can collaborate. We have groups, networking groups for certain programs that we offer. One in particular is a program for previously incarcerated individuals that are entrepreneurially minded. But we know we can't teach them anything, that we're just, providing tools so that they can use the skills that they have already. One of those tools is a social media, Facebook group where they can collaborate and share with one another. So for us, it's been helpful in the work that we do.
Great. Dr. Jamal, as we know, a great deal of people use social media as the gospel truth, and they get a lot of their information as it relates to, healthcare and things of that nature from social media. Has your practice used social media as a tool to engage the community and to inform them on, solutions for wellness and well-being? Have you found that it was really difficult and you had to correct a lot of the misinformation that's spreading around on social media?
No, I think that's an excellent question. And to your point, I think you're absolutely correct. Our practice, and most practices do have some form of outreach and informational sort of websites that kind of help discuss, hot button topics such as heart disease or breast or colon cancer, as you mentioned. But there is a lot of misinformation out there, or just some anecdotal information that may not ring true for everybody. And we do find ourselves correcting information in certain situations. And I think the tough part is that I completely agree with someone reading up about their disease, but you got to have a reliable source. And even once you read about that disease, there is a layer of understanding that your doctor can put upon your own studies that'll help take you a step forward. And I'll talk about colon cancer as an example. If you were to look that up on the internet, you would see that there's several ways to be screened for colon cancer. You can use something called a fit card, where after you have a bowel movement, you stick a brush in the toilet and you just wipe it on the card and send it off. You can have a CT scan of your belly, or you can have a colonoscopy. And if you read about all three of those screening methods, your mind would say, well, I can do either one. And you know, I would be screened for colon cancer and I'm fine. But that's not necessarily true. The card only detects the presence of blood, and the colonoscopy is able to remove precancerous lesions, almost having eyes on the ground, and remove a precancerous lesion and take away that risk of colon cancer that might come within 5, 7, or 10 years. But once you read that information on the internet, it's important to almost have a coaching session, a tutoring session with your doctor to say, what do you think about this? And you know, to the point of a couple of the speakers here, you have to not only have a therapist you trust, you got to have a doctor that you trust as well, that you know is going to look up information that they don't know about, that they're going to tell you the right information that they would tell their own mother or father. And so, you know, so I always encourage my patients to, it's good to read, but I like to give them resources of where to go. Because you can certainly be misguided. Be misguided to such a point that you can find yourself doing something completely opposite of what you're supposed to be doing. Because I know in our world, there's a lot of naturopathic medicine, and I actually like it and I agree with it. But for things like colon cancer, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And there's nothing like having a colonoscopy that takes away that risk. And that's the hard data, that's the hard facts. And when we have individuals dying at a young age in their 40s, in their early 50s, and families are losing their fathers, we just have to do things that we know work. At the same time, while doing other holistic measures as well. And while, and I'll just read it one last time, you know, while we read something, it's important just to make sure that that information is fact-checked with your doctor or really someone you trust that has that background to maybe decode some information that may not seem understandable at the time.
Indeed. So this is a group question, and I'll let each of you answer it. Unique times call for unique solutions. What do you think is a new trend or new strategies that you see in the creative community? How are artists adapting to these unique times? Candace.
So every younger artist that I know is practicing self-care. Self-care is the newest watchwords from yoga, Reiki, massage therapy, meeting in very specific kinds of groups, all those things, getting your nails done, getting your hair done, which I've, you know, I just keep chopping it off myself since this year, but I've never been a girly girl who did nails and toes and massage. I've never been her. So I'm not throwing myself into all of the new ways that people are talking about self-care, but it is the new watchword for all of the younger artists that I know, especially the women. And it's a conversation that's just, it's moving like, you know, like a shotgun about self-care and wellness. And I applaud it. And I wish I could participate more or knew how to participate more, but it is the conversation, I think, that is going on with younger female artists. I don't know, the guys might be too, but I haven't heard them talking about it much. But the women are doing this and taking charge of themselves and their well-being, which is commendable.
Cindy?
I definitely agree with Candace about self-care. I think it's been in a surge. And even in my work with clients, it's something that I've had to focus on a lot with them. And also what I've also had to focus on, like where it's a parallel thing, like I'm going through this too with them. And it's been interesting because, you know, it's almost like trying to find resources or try to meet the same needs without the same resources that we used to have. And so much of what keeps us healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually, and otherwise, is that sense of community. And a lot of people lost touch with that during the pandemic. So I found it really remarkable how, you know, communities can be formed, communities of support could be formed online. You know, like a lot of content, a lot of my clients are young adults, and you know, TikTok is like a really good source of information, of other people's narratives, like the kinds of questions that clients have come into our therapy sessions with about like, well, I saw this TikTok about this thing and I, you know, I relate to it. Can we talk about this a bit more? Can I learn more about this? Like, it's been a great like starting point for discussion and conversation and self-awareness and understanding. You know, I think for a while in the pandemic, I started calling it the great pause, because everything just had to stop. Like everybody had to slow down. Like we weren't sucked into all these distractions. We weren't sucked into the stress of a daily commute, you know, depending on your personal circumstances, of course. And it was just such a, in a way, a good time period to really, you know, do that internal reflection, focus on, you know, who are you in the world? Like, what do you want to do with yourself once this is all over? How do we sit with the anxiety and uncertainty of, you know, this was supposed to be 2 weeks and we're a year and some months later, you know, just emerging from this finally. So it's certainly a challenging experience, but it's also been a really good opportunity to grow and to evolve and do a lot of that personal development that you used to have to pay a lot of money to go on some retreat to do, just to escape your life for a second. You know, like everyone just had to have a seat, and we did, you know. So.
Indeed. Paul? Thank you, Cindy.
I think we found ourselves back in the age where we are sharing information, whether we are in group me or group text, or as Candace was doing, recording videos, and we're sharing knowledge. We hear about grant opportunities, and I'm sharing it with my artist friends, or murals that come up, some certain things that may not fit me, and I'm passing along to people that it may benefit them. I think in the end, most of the people in my artist community, we want to see each other win. So that sharing of information is vital, and technology has been helping us do that.
Awesome. At this time, we're going to tap into the chat and answer some questions.
Panelists, thank you for this great discussion. I have a few questions from Facebook. One from Alexis. What do you look for in friends in support of your mental health? I've tried not to assume someone isn't a good friend just because they don't understand or have the same patience to help with my needs during mental health or potentially in crisis there. I like lots of connection time, and I'm learning how to connect with myself if no one is available. Any thoughts?
I'll jump in really quickly. I think that when finding a support group of friends, it's really important to keep in mind the other person's capacity, you know, to be of support to you at a particular time. You know, sometimes, you know, we have to all exercise our ability to conserve our energy from time to time, and be able to reciprocate, you know, how we're conserving that energy and respecting each other's boundaries. Like that builds a healthy friendship. You know, like I would rather my friend be honest with me and say like, I don't have the capacity for this today. I'm going through a lot too right now, but let's catch up another time, you know, like when we can, you know. And I think especially during the pandemic, like trying to be mindful of everyone's experience, how they're dealing with it individually, because everyone's situation is unique, is important. So, you know, I would certainly encourage communication, and also, you know, like learning about what are the limits of your friends. You know, what are they really? And is there open communication, you know, in your friendships about, you know, what folks are going through and what they have the capacity for day to day? Because it can vary wildly. It can vary wildly.
So for me, reciprocity is queen and king. If I give and give and give, and then nothing comes back, then I have to kindly say goodbye. And usually when I say goodbye, I actually tell people why I'm exiting a friendship. I don't leave it to, you know, oh, she just didn't call me back, or I don't know what's going on with her, because then that starts, you know, some other little stuff. So you have to explain to people that you're not, you feel, and it always has to talk about from where you're feeling, that I feel that I'm not getting anything in return right now. So I'm going to step away from this friendship right now. It doesn't mean that later we can't be friends again, but right now there's things going on in my life. There may be things going on in your life, and I need to remove myself. And I think that's fair to say that to people, and I think it's okay. And some people may not understand, and that's okay too, because you got to protect yourself all the time at all costs, because you have to be your own warrior. You have to be, when your mom and dad are gone, my mom and dad are gone, I have to be my mom and dad for me. I've got to be my aunt and uncle for me. All these people have gone already. They're not here to protect me anymore. I have to be my own protector. And so I have to tell people sometimes that I need to step away. And sometimes, you know, I'll shoulder, I say, it's probably just me, but I'm a step back.
Next question, Laura.
Sure, I've got one more from Facebook from Wendy. This is for the creatives, which all of you are. But how is your creative work influenced by the equity conversation?
So for me, my work is daily affected by Blackness, every single day. So whatever is going on in the community is going to impact the work that I am doing. The series that I'm working on right now, at first glance, it seems whimsy, it seems joy-filled, but then I write flash fiction that goes with each piece that talks about what in the world made these girls look like that on the day I created them. So it's pretty much like a memoir of the coronavirus for me, creating these pieces and creating the flash fiction. So the women talk about vaccinations. They talk about, I'm not hugging you. I'm sorry, stay back, 6 feet, please. They're talking about George Floyd calling his mama in his last breath. So all of that plays into the work of these brown-limbed girls, the series that I've done throughout this year and into this new year, that are they're just joyful characters, but in their joy, they're still telling a story about what is going on in their world. So they discuss the inequity of the world they live in and how they make it through.
Thank you.
Oh, were you gonna go ahead?
Oh no, please go ahead,
Okay.
Cindy.
All right. Yeah, during the, I mean, I agree with Candace. I agree with like everything you're saying, Candace, so it feels a bit redundant to say so. But I mean, like who I am is in all of my work. And there's no separating that out. I can't, you know, I'm in everything I do. The work that I started to do during the pandemic, mostly because I just didn't have access to the space to do the indigo and the textiles that I normally do. I had to use other mediums for my work. And after the George Floyd murder, I started making these like timed mark making pieces of 8 minutes and 46 seconds each of just nonstop mark making. Because I don't normally work on paper, all I had were grocery bags from Trader Joe's to do this artwork on. And so I'm using these bags as my paper and doing these mark making pieces. They're actually at the Museum of Science and Industry now. But I felt compelled to do it. Like I didn't make these pieces with any intention of anyone seeing them or responding to them the way that they did. Like I needed to process the horror of what happened because I just could not understand. And for me, my art has always been just for me. Like I don't do art therapy. I need to keep those worlds separate because the art is what keeps me sane and keeps me at a capacity where I can be there for other people. The art is what's there for me. And so, I've started doing a lot more mixed media work and doing more work around just the dishonoring of Black bodies and Black people in this country, and more specifically around that. And it's had a great influence on my work. So it's visceral, like the showing it to others feels like an afterthought, like the, posting it on Instagram feels like, an afterthought, like it wasn't made for that. It just ended up there at some point because I feel pressured to post at least once in a while. Yeah, but I'm glad I have, and the reception has been really powerful to the work as well.
Erica, did you want to add something? Sure.
Sure, just real quick. I'll just say that, our organization exists with equity in mind. We're providing opportunities to businesses that can't go to a traditional bank, maybe because they're startup business, maybe because they're underserved, low, moderate income, previously incarcerated, et cetera, I can go on. But the very, reason why we exist is to remove those inequities through breaking down barriers to financial access and capital. And so our goal is to, ensure that, we have access to all types of capital so that we can grow thriving businesses, so that we can create thriving neighborhoods and, bring in amenities that are needed. So our very vein is built around equity. And I think that speaks truth for other CDFIs, just like we are. We exist because we saw gaps in the industry where we had a space and a voice to be able to fill those gaps through infusion of capital to really empower others to do the things that they do. And we don't just land in Chicago. We can land throughout the Chicago area, so metropolitan area, so greater Cook County, and some parts of Northwest Indiana. But if you're outside of those areas, there are other organizations, CDFIs. If you look up, CDFI, you can go to OFN, Opportunity Finance Network, and look up your nearest network of CDFIs. You can find those in your area. I saw the question that just popped up as I was speaking. So, but again, equity is in the vein of our existence. We wouldn't exist if, it wasn't built around removing inequity.
Thank you, Erica. And before we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of the panelists, keeping in mind the 4 pillars of wellness that we discussed this evening, and beginning with Dr. Jamal, what does wellness mean to you?
Wow. Well, I think wellness, in addition to the pillars, it's about how those pillars work together, and I think they're all interrelated. Financial plays into the mental, physical, and spiritual. The pillars can help support the other pillars, but it's important to have just strong pillars all around. And I think that plays into wellness. It's just very hard to have a good mental health when your finances or your basic needs aren't necessarily met. It's hard to adhere to the physical things you need to do if you're just not feeling well or not up to it. And spiritually, that really just feeds into all categories. So I think when we look at things like wellness, it's being cognizant that wellness, there's a financial piece to it. Your financial wellness, your spiritual, your mental, and your physical. Just being cognizant that all those matters, and you can't starve one and feed the others.
Absolutely, thank you. Charles, what are your thoughts? What does wellness mean to you?
Healing the relationship with you and yourself. Yeah, I think once you're healed and you're well, that's gonna filter out to all your other relationships.
Thank you. And the second part is, are you working on a new body of work, or are you involved in any new projects that you'd like to discuss?
That's for JP?
That's for JP.
I'm excited. Yeah. Woohoo. In June, I'm presenting Future Memories 3 in Johannesburg, South Africa, an international show with these celestial bodies behind me. I'm creating people in place and showing how we're all interconnected and we're all celestial bodies. And the subtitle for this one is Celestial Bodies. The first one was exploring the diasporic imagination, and I dealt with memory and imagination, and now I'm tackling spirituality.
Thank you. Paul, what does wellness mean to you? And to follow that up, you could let us know what you're working on.
Wellness. I used to have a mantra that I used to live by. I'm in total control of my mind, body, and soul. And I think that you should always have some type of balance, and you should always keep your stress levels as low as possible, because that affects everything in your life, both physically and everything else. What am I currently working on? I took some pieces. I had a solo exhibit earlier this year at Millikan University, and I took some of those pieces, and they're at 16th Street Bar, which is like off 16th in Michigan. I'll be doing like a little sipping conversation for those in the area if you want to come out with me next Wednesday.
I have my eye on a few pieces.
All righty. I'm also a co-curator of a show out here at the Beverly Arts Center, which is focused around the migration of the blues from the South to Chicago and everything that happened once it got here in Chicago. That opens up next week. And we're doing some stuff in October, because everything's not finalized with the collective Pigment International. That's centered around pretty much everything that happened last year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Candace, I know what you're working on. You mentioned it, but please share with us what you're working on and what wellness means to you.
So the 4 pillars that you're talking about, I've been at the top of a tripod most of my life. I've completely missed one of the pillars, and that is the financial piece of understanding, and as PJ said, the gist of it. I don't have that together. I just don't. And so Erica, where's Erica? Where'd Erica go? Is Erica still here?
I am here.
Okay,
Yes, I'm
Erica.
here. Don't say what I said when using the acronym.
Get your stuff together. Get your stuff together. Do you offer ways for people to catch up on getting their stuff together? Because I have I've not applied for a lot of grants and things in my life because I've always thought if it's about my work, I need to be selling my work. And I have been a self-sustaining artist for about 20 years, but there are things that I have not done that could have yielded me so much more in my life, but I need help to get that done. I need help to be on top of those things. And I've done workshops and things sometimes, but they didn't really help me. I need like one-on-one mentorship or counseling or something on how I get my financial life record keeping in order, the record keeping of it. Because I survived. I mean, I survived, but I know I could be so much better and so much more if the financial record keeping was there for me. And so I'd like to know, does your organization offer that kind of mentorship or counseling?
So we have certain programs that are combined with one-on-one technical assistance. We call it technical assistance, but it's business development services. And that's generally for our PERK program that supports returning citizens. We have a program called Empower. It supports small Black contractors. And we do provide that one-on-one TA for those folks. For all of our borrowers, we do, it just comes with the territory of being a nonprofit micro lender. We do provide that direct TA one-on-one, but we certainly can refer you to other organizations as well that we partnered with that can provide you with the one-on-one. I'm like you, workshops are good, right? But they're not for everyone. Everyone isn't at the same level, in terms of their business and where they are. I think the best type of help that you can get is saying, all right, well, let's dive in, let's see where you are, and let's figure out how we can assist you to get where you want to be. We can certainly refer you to resources.
Okay, so
I'll
Erica,
make sure.
reaching out to you beyond this panel to find out those resources. Thank you.
Bring it on. We can help you get your stuff together.
And we're just at 8 o'clock, but Candace, I'll let you share what you're working on, and then quickly, Cindy, you can tell us what wellness means to you and what you're working on.
Okay, so I'm going to have a solo show at the Thelma Harris Gallery in Oakland, California. It opens August the 20th. Very, very excited. All new works in that show. It follows behind a sold out show at the Stella Jones Gallery in New Orleans in March. And quickly, between March and this show, I got something called the small C. I'm not claiming the big C word, Dr. Ross. I got a small C, stage 1, but I'm also have Lynch syndrome. So I got to be watching this. Yeah, baby, I know. So I got to be watching this stuff the rest of my life. So, colonoscopy is the next, as soon as I heal from the first surgery, then we're doing the colonoscopy, and then it's just going to keep going. So that was between the first show and the second show. And then with these girls, because people can't get all of them and people love them, we're working on a book.
Yes.
So
that's amazing.
Hopefully you'll all be a part of the book somehow, some way.
Yes. Oh, you didn't mention that they were featured in billboards over the summer for COVID awareness.
This is true. So my work was tapped by the city of Chicago, the Mayor Lightfoot's COVID awareness program. And so some of the brown limb girls were up on big billboards in those neighborhoods that were most threatened by COVID.
Great work always. Thank you. Cindy, what does wellness mean to you, and what are you working on?
Just a small question. So wellness to me, the way I think about it for myself and when I'm working with clients is that it's about whether or not you're functioning in your life the way that you want to, the way that feels like comfortable and like you're being productive in your own life. And that can vary person to person. But if that is out of alignment, or if you're not, kind of doing the things you'd like to be doing or feel you should be able to do, find resources and help and accept the help that's offered to you. Because no provider, no doctor, no therapist can help someone who's not ready. you know, and sometimes readiness can be an issue. Once folks realize like how much work, you know, might need to be done in a particular area, it can be overwhelming very quickly. I wanted to just touch on a quick question from the chat in the Zoom about whether or not you have to inform other people whether or not you're in therapy. No, you never do. That is absolutely confidential. You don't have to inform anybody about any kind of treatment that you're in, period. And it would be, I mean, it's legally protected. Like, I cannot tell anyone who my clients are, anything they've told me. I have to take that to the grave. The only time I would break confidentiality is if I think they're going to harm themselves or harm another person. That's it. Everything else stays in that room and in that conversation. So just to respond to the person who had asked that question earlier. As far as my projects that are coming up, as I mentioned, my work is at the juried Black Creativity Juried Art Exhibition at the Museum of Science and Industry. I also have a solo exhibition opening up at Riverside Arts Center. And it is work that is focused on the police violence that have happened towards Black people. It's called On Respect, which is a greeting in Haiti. When you enter someone's house, you say honor and you respond with respect. And so it's a greeting and an expectation, and something I'm hoping to restore to those who have been harmed and violated by police. So that's my immediate project coming up. And I'm also going to be participating in Family Day at the Museum of Science and Industry, which Tiffany and I just worked out this week. So that's the freshest piece of news, which I'm very excited about.
So are we. So are we. Someone in the chat just asked, where is the Riverside Gallery?
It is very close to the Botanical Gardens in the west suburb of Chicago. I'm from the city of Chicago. I don't know the suburbs quite as well, but it's Riverside Arts Center. So if you Google it, you'll find it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I just want to end on my favorite quote by Gwendolyn Brooks. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And just to touch on the aspect of community, many of you mentioned in your practices, and Candace, you mentioned that as your pillar of spirituality, Pullman Artspace Lofts, it's a community of creatives, and I'm really excited about the revitalization that's happening in that area. So best of luck to all of the residents. And I'll turn it back over to Shalom.
Thank you, Tiffany. Well, it was an honor and a pleasure to hold space with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. What a gift to be together in community. That was an incredible conversation. It covered a lot of ground: trauma, breath, joy, resilience, entrepreneurship, uncertainty, opportunity, self-care. I mean, we did a lot. Obviously, community is so critical to our wellness, so this time has been cherished. A big thank you to Tiffany for her grace in facilitating this conversation and for calling some of you into the space. And I want to thank each one of our panelists, Dr. Jamal, Cindy, Paul, Charles, Erica, Candace. Thank you guys so much for what you shared with us and everybody that's listening. And then to those of us that from Artspace that were behind the scenes, I want to thank Kim Moore, whose idea this was to bring you all together, to share your genius with other folks. Greg Foley, who you see down at the bottom of your screen, probably he's at the bottom of my screen. Laura Moran and Gil Aiken for their amazing work to put this together. And again, to each one of you for your time and energy that you spent with us. So for more events like this one, please check out Artspace on Facebook at Artspace Projects, and go to our website, which is www.artspace.org, and follow Artspace. We love supporting artists, and we really, really love this conversation. Before you guys go, though, Kim is here and would like to get a little photo bomb before everybody takes off. So,
hi everybody. Thank you.
Hey Kim.
Hi Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you all.
all right.
Thank you. Blessings, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Are we good? You want to see him?
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Sac passe.